Hello, I'm Archie Luxury and welcome to the program, fuckers. And today I'd like to talk about wristwatches that have been basically time warp wristwatches. And these are wristwatches that have basically stayed the same form as they were originally intended. And it's quite fascinating. We can look at the brands Omega and Rolex, and Omega in the 60s had a very, very beautiful Speedmaster 300. That was Omega's dive watch, and it competed against the Rolex Submariner. And some would say it was actually a better watch than the Submariner. But it's one of these things. Omega chose to continually refine and update this piece. And as a result of this here, the modern Speedmaster doesn't really look anything like the vintage piece. It's very, very different, and it's kind of a shame. You know what I mean? It looks very different to how the original execution of the Speedmaster was. And on the screen here, you can see the vintage piece. This is a vintage piece from about the early 60s. And about a 10-year-old Omega Speedmaster. So I've tried to match up the two. So big changes. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just it's like looking at a modern Jaguar. It's really a modern Jaguar. You could look at, say, an S-Type. It's not really that much in common with the old Mark II. So it's sort of lost that DNA, if you know what I mean. The interesting thing is that whilst Omega has changed the Speedmaster, they decided to freeze. That's right, fuckers. They decided to freeze the Omega Speedmaster men on the moon. Their chronograph has basically remained stuck in a time warp. And they've released a few versions of the Speedmaster. They've even got a sapphire version. They've released, God forbid, an automatic version. They have certainly played on it, but to Omega's credit, they've kept the original Halcyon plastic glass version relatively unchanged. Okay, I know there was some movement changes. It was originally a 3-2-1 movement, which then evolved into the 8-6-1, and then it evolved into the 1-8-6-1. Yeah, fair enough, but it's basically the DNA is very, very strong. There's no question of who the parents of a modern Omega Speedmaster are. There's no question of the lineage. And it's quite interesting. Whereas Rolex themselves, they've done the same thing with the Submariner. It's basically hasn't really changed much. Yes, they've added a sapphire crystal. Yes, they cleaned up the bracelet. They made little improvements. But you look at a 1950s, 1960s Submariner, there's clear lineage to the current piece. There's no. It's just like the Omega Speedmaster. And it's quite funny. Rolex, with their Submariner, has basically kept the piece in a time warp, just slowly evolving the piece. Whereas with the Rolex Daytona, it was completely revised, when the sapphire version came out. And it's a completely different animal. It went from being a manual wind to an automatic. It had it used the movement change, major movement change, because it went to an automatic. And, you know, it hasn't been gradual. And with Omega, they've kind of done the same thing with the Seamaster. And it's quite funny. If you are a retro fucker, a hipster, one would say the best chronograph to get would be the Omega Speedmaster Man on the Moon with the plastic glass and a modern sapphire no-date sub. That would be the two sweet spots in this retro craze. And it's quite funny that both brands, I'm quite happy that they did it to alternative pieces. Omega evolved, the Seamaster changed a lot, whereas the Speedmaster remained untouched. And in Rolex's case, the Daytona, the Cosmograph, changed heaps, but Rolex kept the Submariner. And that's the two sweet spot fuckers. The two sweet spots would be the Speedmaster Man on the Moon and fuckers, the Submariner. That's the sweet spot. Those two there are retro classics. So I just wanted to hear what the audience think. I think it's fascinating. It's so fascinating that each brand chose, and I'm so happy that they both didn't update the Seamaster and the Submariner and leave the Cosmograph or the data or the chronograph. They did alternate ones. It's almost like these fuckers were working in unison. And they're not, because they're Swiss fuckers. And Swiss fuckers, they don't talk to the competition. They're very snooty fuckers. So it's an amazing development. And I think it's just a freak of nature. So fuckers, tell me what you think. I'm Archie Luxury. And this has been a look at the sweet spot in the Omega and Rolex range. Hello fuckers, Archie Luxury here. Very, very simple bit of advice. If you're in Brisbane, Australia, and you're looking for a wristwatch, either new or used, or you're looking for a wristwatch repair, come and see my friends at Brisbane Vintage Watches. These are good fuckers to deal with. They're honest, they're enthusiasts, they love watches, and they'll look after you. And best of all, they're one of the best dealers I know of. And I really love the guys at Brisbane Vintage Watches. So fuckers, if you're looking for a wristwatch in Brisbane town, Australia, please contact my friends at Brisbane Vintage Watches. See you later, fuckers.